Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. Today, we have Shriya Nevatia with us. Shriya is a former director at OnDeck, a cohort-based learning startup, and now heads Violet Society, another cohort-based learning startup. She also works with a community project called Silva, which I'd love to know more about. Hey, Shriya, how are you? How are you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So, just to get off, you clearly from your introduction and from what we've spoken about, you've had a lot of experience in niche communities in the entrepreneurial space, especially founder communities, and with the work you've already done at On Deck. What do you have to say about like the experience? Why did you get into something like this? Why founder communities? How did you go get into that? What was the whole experience like?
So I started off by solving my own problem. So when I went to undergrad and went to Tufts for college, I didn't really know what I wanted to major in when I started. So that's part of what encouraged me to join Tufts was that there was an engineering school, an arts and sciences school, comp sci, math, education, pretty much any major that I was interested in was available. So I chose it over some other more liberal arts like specific schools. And then I figured out by my sophomore year that I wanted to be in tech and startups. But I felt like the people involved around me with startups already, they all knew each other. It was kind of clicky. Like I couldn't get into the clique and it was already established since freshman year. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll make my own clique. So because Tufts is outside of Boston, you can just like take the subway into downtown Boston. I went to Boston tech events. I just looked at meetup.com, looked at like Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, and BU websites because Harvard and MIT, of course, are very respected and established. Northeastern and BU are huge, and so they can do more student events with a higher student population versus Tufts is kind of like in between and smaller. And so I started going to like other schools' events that were open and like General Assembly Boston. Microsoft opened up this big center called the Nerd Center, so got super involved that way. And as I was attending the events, I realized like, oh, it seems like the host of the event is connected to the speaker, connected to the attendees. They're learning because they're running the event, but they're also listening to any of the workshops or talks. And I was like, this kind of seems like a better move than just attending things. So that's how I started to get into hosting and running my own tech events in person and communities online because I felt like that host position person got to learn a lot about their career and build their network faster and more effectively than the attendees. And so that's why I started the Violet Society at first in college in 2013. But since then, I worked at a bunch of different small startups. So I was at On Deck for about 2 years, like 2020 to this spring, and then left and joined Silva full time 3 months ago. So Violet Society, I'm not really doing much with it anymore, but I still kind of keep it on my LinkedIn and Twitter because it always holds a close place in my heart. I keep in touch with a lot of the former members, but now I'm really focused on Silva as my full-time job. But I continue to do all kinds of tech community stuff on the side.
Interesting. So, if we think about it, like there are a lot of founder communities that exist on Twitter, Slack, Discord that are trying to bridge founders together. So, what are like the top three problems that these founder communities have that you're trying to solve through Silva or that you try to solve through the Violet Society?
I missed the first two-thirds of that question. If you could try it again
Okay.
to end it.
So, there are a lot of like founder communities that exist currently, say Twitter, Discord, or Slack, and a lot of them have been trying to solve the same problem, like bringing that level of stickiness between people in startups, people in entrepreneurship, and helping them launch the next big thing. So, what are the top two or three big problems that you're trying to solve through what you've been building with the Violet Society or On Deck or now with Silver?
Totally. Yeah, I've learned so much about this because I have tried to launch so many founder communities that have failed, and I've also been a member of a lot that haven't worked out. And so I think over time, as I saw what worked with Violet Society, definitely what worked with the On Deck Founder Fellowship and Catalyst, and now I'm bringing those learnings to Silva and everything else I'm doing. I've seen kind of the common mistakes, and I think there's many common mistakes with communities. So a couple of pillars to start with when somebody's founding a new one. be very clear on who your target audience is and figure out what their needs are, not what you think their needs are. So first with the target audience, sometimes people are like, oh, my community's for founders. And it's so general. You actually want to pick a stage, an industry, a vertical, a location in the world. You don't have to narrow it by all of those things, but have some kind of opinion where you say, here's the boundaries of where my audience begins and ends, so that it's not just like anyone, and then you can serve them better because they have more in common. If you do a global online community for pre-seed and seed stage founders, then you're like, okay, yes, it's global. They don't have location in common, but they have their stage in common. And their industries aren't similar, but they're all venture backed. So that's like the ODF focus, and that totally worked. Like, yes, there might be a biotech founder who doesn't have other biotech founders in the cohort, and like a CPG founder who only has 3 other CPG founders. But in general, they're all trying to launch and grow a business at a similar stage and like raise from some similar really active investors. So it was easier for the On Deck team to figure out what events and resources do we give them that will solve those problems. And so then that second pillar is like, if your community is not using something that you're giving them, or you're spending a lot of time on something that isn't gaining traction, like I see a lot of community teams spend a lot of time on content that no one's reading or using. And it's just like, you gotta stop, like refocus on what they're actually going to use. Continually listening to customer feedback and figuring out like what actually solves their problems. That's really crucial. It's the same as building any kind of business. You want to listen to customers all the time. You want to know who your customer is, and you want your product to solve their most urgent problems.
I think I'd want to ask you about something. So, having previously applied to on-deck founders, I remember that there's a certain understanding about how students can also get into it. And what do you think, especially since we go to school and a lot of our listeners are in school and just maybe out of school, what are things that young students or young entrepreneurs or people who are getting into the entrepreneurship industry or just wanting to get a good job at a very like a fast growing startup or a high growing startup, what are things that they should focus on? What are things that they can actually do, think about to, become a part of such communities, to actually have a part of distribution in such communities and hold some kind of importance in such communities?
Totally. Yeah, I think I'll start with a component of the question, since there's a lot of pieces, and then you can let me know what I missed and we can go into it. So what I recommend to like entrepreneurial students is first off, like you're in school. So there's plus sides and there's downsides. Plus side is you have anything you explore part-time or in an internship is way lower risk than the people who are risking their whole full-time job to do those things. Because the second you graduate, you no longer have this excuse of like, oh, I'm in school. School's my main thing. Everything I do on the side is just trying it out and dabbling. That gives it so that any business you start, it's not your like livelihood at risk, because you don't necessarily need to be, the expectation would normally be that a student wasn't making any money from a business. So but once you graduate, you have this question of like, do I go full-time or not? Do I give up my full-time salary to do my startup or not? So I really recommend 2 things. 3 things. One is try to make at least $1. Like try and sell things that make actual revenue. Yes, there are lots of venture scale ideas that are like, they don't make revenue up front. They're like doing a lot of research and then productizing it, or you're kind of like subsidizing the initial flywheel that it takes to build an enterprise company. And so you like raise venture to build your product and then you scale it. Those are fine. Totally. Everyone can build whatever business they're most well suited for. But I really encourage people to just charge people money for something to start. When you're trying to build your very, very first business ever, forget about like, is it bootstrapped? Is it venture scale? Is it this? Is it that? Figure out something that you can make that brings value to people and make it. You can like sell templates on Canva. You can be like do your own agency and do like marketing projects for people or web dev projects for people. You can make an app put it on the app store and sell it for 99 cents. All kinds of things that allow you to actually charge money and figure out like, will people pay for this? The things that I did that charged money, and I didn't even think that these were businesses until many years of doing them, was charging people for events and selling tech event tickets. And that taught me so much, because before I actually charged for tickets, when I was just collecting free RSVPs, there was much less friction to people saying yes. The second you charge for something, it's a lot harder to get them to put their credit card info down. And that taught me so much about making a truly valuable product. So that's one, charge for something real. Recommendation 2 is get hands-on industry experience. Even if you want to be in VC or you want to be a founder, you should get a job at a startup ASAP. It can be a part-time job. It can be a local startup. It can be something no one's ever heard of. It can be super early. It can be unpaid during the school year. Like, don't get too hung up on what it is before you have any internships on your resume. I think that people will like only apply to Facebook, Google, Twitter, and then they're like, oh, I didn't get in. Okay, like, guess I can't do a tech internship. Totally not true. Like, you can start with a random startup no one's heard of, so that the next time you interview, you're like, okay, this fall, once a week, I went into this local startup that's building some kind of like, whatever it is. It can be anything. And you're just like helping and getting work experience and showing that you can have work experience. Third is be super smart about networking and connections. I was like very hung up on this idea of like the like campus famous people, you know, like big man on campus. And so I was like, freshman year I got in and I was like, how do people become this? And how do I become one? I don't know to what degree I succeeded. I wasn't like really like cool enough to be one of the top people. But I think that within the spaces of like comp sci and dancers, people knew who I was. And so I would definitely encourage you to like, if you're trying to be in venture, you're trying to be a founder, anything where your network really matters, even like operator executive track, a network never hurts. It only helps. Be social, be friendly, befriend people who are doing interesting things, who are smart, who have cool majors, add them on LinkedIn, add them on Twitter. Just like you only realize some people only realize once they graduate, like, oh crap, I had this network around me of hundreds or thousands of smart people who I could have befriended then in undergrad so that we would be able to keep in touch for years to come. And now, like, because I just hung out with my 5 friends, it's kind of weird. I just would hit them up and be like, hey, we graduated at the same time, but never spoke. And it's a lot stronger if you're like, hey, remember we were in Block Club together? So like, yeah, network a lot in college. It's a great time to plant the seeds.
I just wanted to say about the second thing, like the second point you raised. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of times that people just go into, you know, FANG or a specific
Yeah.
type of very big company, a big corp, and there's this essay by Paul Graham where he says, if you want to become a founder, even if you want to do something very cool, you won't realize what the problem is, or you won't realize what's happening unless you go and work in a different kind of industry that you're not going to be exposed to. Like if you're a CS student, there's a very good chance you're probably just going to do software roles or techie roles and probably in a very software-based company. But only if you go venture into a hardware-based company or something like maybe VC or product or something like that, are you ever going to know if there's any other interest or any other passion that you have more than what you're currently doing? Because uh, just out of experience with my friends too, there's so many people who work for money or who don't know what they're doing now, and they're like, yes, when I figure it out, I'll move into that. But when will you or how will you move into that if you don't
Yeah.
know, if you don't go around and explore? And you know, even like this whole podcast started off with the idea of just doing something because we had some interest in it and we don't know where it'll go someday, but like this is just talking to people, and that's the whole idea behind it.
Yeah, you'll learn more by doing than just by like reading. Not to say don't read. Obviously, I also have learned a lot and like acted upon a lot of Paul Graham's essays, so definitely read too. But I think like the other thing to remember is college is such an awesome time to dabble, because if you just take a random class or you do an internship for 3 months, that's not high risk at all. You can very easily do like a totally different internship every 3 months. Like I did a teaching program the summer after freshman year because I couldn't get a tech internship. And it ended up being fantastic because I got to kind of scratch this itch I'd always had of, do I actually want to be in education or not? And I realized like it taught me about the whole world of ed tech. And I was like, awesome. this is what I'm going to do. Like, I don't want the day-to-day of being a school teacher, but I do want to like impact the industry of education. Now, how can I like combine education and tech? But having that summer where I was a school teacher in a classroom teaching kids really helped me understand. I was like, oh, I'm actually not that good at this. Like compared to other teachers, I was like, compared to the average person, I might seem like a good teacher, but compared to other teachers, I was like, you're all way better at this than I am. So now let me ask myself, like, what could I be really good at? And every like 3-month internship you do, I think sometimes people get stressed that like I have to choose my major and my career path in freshman or sophomore year and then I'm locked in and I need to just do like all these extra classes in that major and all of my internships and jobs have to be related to that career path. That's not true, and you might just lock yourself into stuff that you end up not wanting. Like, I'm 30 now. I cannot tell you how many people I've seen spend their whole 20s just doing consulting, business school, more consulting. And I'm like, these are all kind of just like preparation or exploration for something. What's the something? And these aren't people who like really are dedicated to like, I want to do consulting for my life. They're all like, I did consulting because I couldn't figure out what the heck I wanted to do. And I just like, if you spent time and energy in undergrad when it was really safe to take risks, trying random stuff, then you might not have had to do this many years of like the try it out jobs and experiences, which is like, I not to like crap on either of those things. I know tons of really, really smart founders, operators, investors who started off in consulting, and it gives you a lot of skills. It's great, but like try to like walk directly towards what you want instead of doing all these experiences that help you figure out what you want when you already had 4 years of college to do that. Like, you're there. It's happening right now. You're in a school with a bunch of majors, a bunch of people doing different things, clubs and internships. So like, use them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a follow-up question to that would be, for like a typical student in college, say, they're interested in finding what they actually like instead of finding what pays them the most. So what would be some of the steps that you would give them, saying like, this is the path that you need to take to find what you actually love and you want to pursue it for the rest of your life? Because we've seen like a lot of our friends, and especially like in the startup community, they're like, we did this internship, we didn't like it. We want to do something like this, but it should pay as much. But where does that, like, you can say, like the sweet spot between what they want to make and what they want to do come in place?
Yeah, so component one of this is you have to be really introspective. So think about yourself and try and shut out the opinions of other people. So like the thing that I did a lot in high school and college, I was like crazy curious, just researched a lot of career paths online, watched a lot of like YouTube. If TikTok had existed, then I would have watched a lot of TikTok about those career paths, understand what people's day-to-day are, understand all the different jobs in that industry. You won't be able to become an expert, but like you can try. You can even like reach out to people cold on LinkedIn. And then that's the component of like exploring. Then you can have all kinds of ways to guide your exploration. For example, like I just sat down and read the entire course book. I don't like, some people do that who are like crazy type A like me, but a lot of people just go straight to the major that they want. Like, read the whole course book. Understand what's the whole like universe of all of the classes I can take. Then like on the activity fair, get the activity fair database like every semester. What are all the clubs that exist? Like, try and find out what's the world of possibility to figure out like, what do I want to explore? What might intrigue me? Step one, that's the explore part. Now, step two, the like money part, I think this is a really common mistake. People are just like, oh, the only things that make money are like tech, finance, medicine. Like they just have this law. They have a very short list and they think that only the professions are the things that make money. The reason they have these great reputations as professions is because there's a great fallback job. Like, you don't have to be particularly talented to, or an outlier to succeed. Obviously, Beyonce is not struggling for cash, but the average person, if they're like, I want to be a singer, everyone's like, do you? That doesn't mean that you can't do that though. So what I really encourage people to do is like, part of why I love startups and entrepreneurship, and I encourage everyone who's like pretty like you just have to be a bit above like average in intelligence and diligence and grit. You don't have to be like crazy outlier necessarily. Any of those, once you hit that like bar, try and figure out, can I build a business around the thing I love the most? Like if somebody says, oh, I love making jewelry, it's like, well, you could like buy your materials from Marshalls, make jewelry, sell it on Etsy, and make very, very little money. And then if you sat down and tried to calculate your hourly pay, you'd probably be making like 50 cents an hour. It would not be a scalable thing. Versus that person can go, oh, let me learn about the startup industry. Let me be the jewelry expert, and let me find somebody who's like a business finance person, and we'll like build the next Rocks box. Like we'll build a new jewelry distribution model. We'll build like why isn't there a good Bloomingdale's for jewelry for Gen Z and millennials? Because like none of Gen Z and millennials are not buying their jewelry at Bloomingdale's. What's the way to change that? You can make a business in like anything basically. And so that's why I encourage people to try and figure out, like, take your passion that may not make money and figure out, can you make an awesome business around this that does make money? Like, I think a lot of people in music tech are people who wanted to be musicians, but they figured out, like, I really don't want the lifestyle of a musician where I'm like a freelancer who's like low pay probably in this like hits driven business. And I asked myself the same thing when I was dancing growing up. I was like, ooh, like would I want to dance as a hobby or would I want to actually dance? When I found out the lifestyle of actual dance as your career, I was like, it doesn't sound good. And I'm not even really, I'm like if this is the talent bar, I like maybe if I practiced a lot, I could reach it, but I'm not really there yet. So I don't think that's the path for me.
Right. And like, one of the things that I've experienced most, and sometimes it just happens to me, being not me included, is that uh, there's so many times that just depending on what labels are assigned to in college or what you see other people doing, you start deciding your what you need to do in life or what you want to do in life. Like one of the
Yeah.
most hard things that both of us face, because I know Mehul and I are very interested in product compared to the average other person at Georgia Tech who's doing a CS degree, who's obviously into software, is that we don't meet a lot of people who are interested in product. And
Mhm.
just by that, sometimes it hits me, am I doing the right thing by looking for product roles? And obviously, compared to software roles, product roles are much more, like, much lesser in quantity and
Yeah.
require very good quality since they are so low. And it just starts making you question yourself. But I think, like you said, it's very important to block that noise out and do the things that you want to. Like, it's not necessary that even something like an internship probably gets you to what you need to do or what you want to achieve in life or what your final goal is. And, just doing what seems right and what can get you closer to where you want to be, I think, is so important. Like you said, for you going to those events has probably given you gave you the perspective about doing community-based events or community cohort-based founder communities, and like that wasn't an internship. It was something you did out of passion to get closer to where you wanted to be, possibly, and where you are right now. And I think that's so important for people today. And just to get a little bit more on that, how, like, are there any qualities that you try to practice as, being a community person, being so active with so many people? And uh, yeah, if you could go with that, then I have another question that I can ask.
Oh yeah, a lot. I think I'm always asking myself like how could I be closer to my ideal self? And then it's sometimes hard to understand what your ideal self is. So I instead ask myself, who are people I admire, either like from close up, like people I work with or I know, or from afar, just like famous people, and what do I admire about them? So, for example, I was recently thinking about I've really admired a lot of the work of Alexis Ohanian for the past few years, but I asked myself, what is it exactly? A lot of people admire him, of course, very popular, very successful, like Reddit's huge, of course, but people like him for different reasons. And when I asked myself my reason, I'm not necessarily trying to be like a consumer social founder. I don't even use Reddit much. Like I have been more into other platforms. But the thing that I really love is like, first off, he is very publicly trying to show like you can be successful and have a very public family too. And he's like hashtag girl dad. Like it's like he's purposely trying to put this all over. He's not like, I'm going to pretend that I don't have a kid. I think that really helps destigmatize, like, having a family should not slow down your career. Another thing that I really like that he does is, like, a few years ago, he did a huge hackathon tour. When hackathons were really cool in undergrad, I have heard that they're not that cool anymore, which is sad. They were really cool in my time, like 2013 to 16. They were awesome. And he did a big tour. And I thought that was really cool. That showed that he wants to be accessible and mentor the next generation. And I asked myself, like, who are cool people in the tech industry? Who are the legends who I admire the most? And why do I admire those legends? And for him, I was like, the reason I admire this legend is because, like, he didn't have to mentor the next generation. He was super successful. He could have just, like, ran off on his yacht. But instead, he was like, I'm going to do a college tour. I want to meet the next generation of builders. I want to mentor them. I want to invest in them. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, that's who I want to be and what I want to cultivate. And so then I, like, spent time asking myself, like, what am I not doing that I should be doing to put myself on that path? And when I talked to a lot of people my age, they were like, once you can afford it and once you're accredited, you should start writing small angel investment checks. Because rather than just talking to the founders and, like, helping them and connecting them, you actually have, like, a stake in their success. And you learn so much by doing that. So that's what I did. I, like, saved up last year so that earlier this year I could start writing angel checks. And just, I want to say for undergrads, because I think a lot of times people think that you have to be very, very wealthy. The angel list minimum for check size is $1,000 usually for small rounds. So you can literally just invest $1,000, which is, like, that's how much people are investing in, like, crypto and their normal investments once you have a full-time tech job. So
as a second part of sorry,
go ahead.
Yeah.
let's go. As just another thing that I wanted to ask. Right now, I'm working at this place called Third Web, and we run a Discord community. And that it just, since both of us, both Mehul and I, are very active. Actively learning about crypto and how crypto has revolutionized the idea of what a community is to a tech company or a tech organization or a tech project, whatever that is, a protocol, DeFi club, whatever that may be, like, with communities becoming so much more important, what are, like, things that you think people can look out for in the future, especially with how popular crypto is becoming and people running full-fledged communities and feedback courses and everything right on Discord and everything being decentralized and a P2P kind of thing. What are things people can look for in the future or look to develop so that they can maximize what's to come with crypto and crypto applications in the future?
So I'm kind of grumpy and old school about crypto. Like, I still hold some and I'm still, like, tracking what's happening, but I think enough bad, scammy, harmful Ponzi schemes have happened that I'm a little wary, and I'm kind of, like, taking a step back and I'm like, let's see what happens. So when people were like, oh my God, DAOs are, like, the future of community, and it's like, let's say 1 year ago, they were just like, this is the next community, this is so much better, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the focus was like, let's have a, like, headless organization. There's no real leaders. People are, like, independently making decisions. I will say, even from, like, college clubs with 20 members, I have never, ever, ever, ever seen a way that worked. It's basically like a communist community instead of a democratic community, and it's terrible. It's so difficult and messy. It basically just leads to communism. It just leads to, like, somebody in the community accruing a bunch of secret power and then, like, taking over and being dictator. Like, there's just no way to have a whole group of people, like, self-manage. It's just a lot more, a lot easier to manage and understand if you set up a group of humans with very clear roles of, like, we're all going to choose, elect, or people earn these positions of impact, and then they make the decisions on behalf of everyone, because it's just crazy inefficient to try and, like, get decisions for everyone. This, of course, is my very cursory understanding of DAOs. It's not like I know that there's, like, other opportunities, but it's more to say that, like, obviously I'm in tech. Obviously I love progress and I love innovation. For the concept that we will be able to organize humans and human interaction totally differently because of crypto, the jury's still out for me. Like, I want to see, on the adoption curve, like, I want to see a little bit more of an increase where this like works for longer than 2 months before I get really excited about it and dive in, and I'm bullish on it.
That makes sense. I mean, if you think about DAOs, typically, it's. I mean, I see where you're coming from and how it relates to like communism, but it's more like people have realized that this kind of problem exists in like school clubs, as you're saying, or like 30 or 40 people groups, and they're trying to solve this with technology. They're trying to say we like there have been problems that existed when each person had equal power in like making decisions, and now we're trying to solve this problem where each person had equal power by technology, so that there are no like nobody's arguing over a particular topic or nobody's having problems. So like there have been like some interesting communities. I think ENS did like a really interesting airdrop recently. I mean, some of them are like doing really great, but we haven't still reached the point, like the breaking point where we could say like this would work. We want each and every organization to work like this.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there are some school clubs also trying to do this. I think somebody at Rutgers is trying to build a DAO around like their school club so that their school club could function in this way. But I don't know where they are. So obviously there are like upsides and downsides, but the main goal here is like to solve the problems that existed in these kind of like communist communities with the help of technology, so that
Yeah, of course, the goal is to solve it. More of what I'm saying is like they're not right now, and I think that like another alternative that I saw a lot jump to after they figured out that didn't work was like, well, let's tokenize it, and based on whoever's holding the most token, and like that's terrible too. You don't want the richest people to run a community. You want the people who are like the most effective, organized, who understand the target audience the best. Like you want those people to run the community, not just like whoever can buy up the most tokens. So I'm very interested. I think that the main thing is like the things that we can use technology. Like this is obviously a huge conversation with generative AI and this whole AI explosion that's like re-explosion that's happening right now. We have to ask ourselves like when does our technology enhance human psychology and capabilities, and when does it like fight against it? And I feel like a lot of the like crypto enabled communities, they're like a technology looking for a problem to solve rather than a technology that's actually solving a human psychology problem, where like so you have to ask yourself like, am I trying to fight human psychology with this like crypto decentralization like DAO?
yeah, I mean there are like different schools of thought, I would say, but like this makes me remember like Greg Eisenberg. I don't know if you heard of like
Yeah.
I think like Avirath and I, both of us, are like really interested in online communities and have like read everything that he writes. Amazing late checkout, I think late checkout
Yeah.
community and blog. So he's been also like really talking about how we can channelize big communities like Reddit or on Reddit or Discord or something like that, and nail down, like unbundle each and every single community with an expert. What you're doing for founders, like you can go to Reddit r/founders, but if somebody wants to have like real feedback, real insight, build a real community, they want to join a place where the person who's running the community is responsible for it and they're providing resources and everything else. So what do you think about the spectrum of unbundling communities? Like a lot of people have written about it, but we haven't really seen it getting like really successful. Like none of those communities have like been, I would say, like as big as Reddit.
Yeah.
So what's your like understanding about that?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because there's kind of like two sets of people thinking about this all the time, coming from different directions. So the people like Greg Eisenberg, like the Clubhouse founders, like Alexis Ohanian, are coming from the like place of, we took consumer social, now let's make it more community oriented. And the people who are building smaller paid membership communities like On Deck, YC, like me now at Silva and our whole team, we're all coming from the opposite direction. And like Chief is the most recent company that actually hit the unicorn status that has primarily a paid membership community as their product. This is the opposite direction. It's like, let's take the stuff that we know works when you have 50 to 200 members and gives them a fantastic experience. Now, how do we, like, we're trying to scale up while the consumer social people are trying to scale down. And I think that over the next couple of years, we're going to figure out some really amazing things that are in the middle. Right now, those paid membership communities have not been able to scale huge, and the consumer social have not been able to retain their users with a deeply intimate experience that feels like personalized. Like one of the communities I work on at Silva is called Food Burrow, and it's food and beverage founders. Food and beverage founders are on Instagram all day. That's where they find suppliers. That's where they find each other. That's where they do their marketing. But Instagram has terrible community like products and resources. It's such a pain for them to connect with each other because all they have are one-way comments and then spammy DMs. That's not like a network of people. It's like if they want to turn that into a network, there's no real way. They have to make a spreadsheet of all of their friends or like put them in their close friend story or something. So the social media platforms largely have not figured out how to give people these like small group community experiences, but the small group communities largely haven't figured out how to scale really big. So we're both kind of like trying to, I think, meet in the middle and figure out the like killer community solution.
Right. Yeah, totally makes sense. Apart from this, another thing that, would be super interesting to know about is that where, like, where do you, what is the kind of thing that you think about with, like, there was this one interesting question that I learned about, I read, interesting question that I read on Twitter where someone asked, what are the three buildings you'd have in your college campus? Only three buildings. And most of the replies were that, one would be the library or where I sit with people, and the other would be where I live, and the second would probably, the third would be a dining hall. And no, like most of the tweets the replies that I saw didn't have any mention of a class or a class building at all, or a science building or a research building or their business building if they go to business school. And it just got me thinking that, and it was that time that I was looking at On Deck and this and that, and it just got to me that is this where learning is supposed to go to, or is this where how you want to probably learn? Because, with something like On Deck, I know I'm primarily interested in product, software, tech kind of roles, getting more into anything tech, like whether it's operations, business, product, all of that kind of stuff. And I'd much rather learn with 10 of my peers and grow with them. And as it's rightly said that, you are only as good as the environment you are in. And so what do you think about learning environments like that? Where do you think the future of learning will head to with cohort-based learning, and especially since you've worked in On Deck, and how do you look at that going?
Yeah, I love this question. I totally agree with those college responses. And that's also because, like, in order to do all these internships and clubs when I was in college, I started getting really crappy grades. Like, my grades were worse every year because freshman year, I was like, oh, I should get good grades. This is college. And the second year, I was like, actually, I'm pretty sure this doesn't matter at all because I want to be in tech startups. So I'm just going to pass. And then when I was just like literally just scraping by, my parents were like, what is going on? And I was like, you don't get it. These don't matter. And they were like, you don't get it. We're paying for this. But yeah, I totally agree with those responses. I think the interesting thing about working On Deck and working on the programs was like, I don't necessarily think that membership communities are the most efficient way to learn. I think they're the most efficient way to meet the right people for what you need. So I feel like the network efficiency problem is one of the biggest problems that all of these communities are solving. It's like what I think of as my job as a community leader is like, how do I curate a group of people such that most things that they need, they will be able to turn to someone else in this community to get the answers. And if they can't, then we have some kind of like mentor council advisory. We bring them in as guest speakers. And that should be like all the people related information that you need should be provided from the community. That's what I think of as my primary job. When I think of like actual educational resources, maybe this is just because like I'm super curious, but I feel like after 5, 6, 7 years of research for tech, I just didn't even need a lot of like blog posts anymore. I was like, yes, there's really, really good, like super specific Substacks, but once you've done 5, 6 years of research, you have the baseline, like you get it. You know how to like build a startup, you know the classic advice on different things. At that point, like I'm not a very content-minded person. That's why I'm acting like it's just done. I'm sure that the people who run amazing things like the First Round blog or the Generalist or Packy's Not Boring would be like, Shriya, like, you're not done. There's a lot that you don't know. Of course, there's a lot that I don't know, but it's more like I prefer at this point to learn from people. But in the early stages, I think your friends your age are like the blind leading the blind. If you're trying to learn from each other, it's not going to be that helpful, frankly. So you should learn from a lot of blogs and books and mentors and speakers. So anyway, I think of like cohort-based courses to me are a bit separate from paid membership communities. You should join the communities for your career that give you exactly the people that you need at the time that you need it. So if you're job seeking, if you're a founder, if you're just started a new role, like you're an investor, I think a community is like perfect for the people. Now, a cohort-based course like Udemy or like one of the MOOC websites or something, that I think gives you the accountability to actually stay on track. So like if you do that big like machine learning course like Andrew Ng's, that is what I think if you treat that like a college class, but you're like, instead of having a college class where like maybe 70% of the people around me don't really care about learning this content and it's not relevant to their future, in an online course, everyone's like opted in. They have absolutely no reason that they have to do this. This is like very self-driven. So if you join one of those and then you're like truly active, it can be an amazing experience. I tried joining so many MOOCs and I like wouldn't keep up with that many of them because I wouldn't set aside time. I think the future of it, actually my friend Ray Bothra runs this company called Shift Up, and they have like in-person learning environments for people to utilize all of the coding resources. So like boot camps are very expensive, but they are effective. I did a coding boot camp called Rhythm School and it was super effective. Shows how much my crap grades in undergrad kind of came back to bite me because I had to do a boot camp after to really learn web dev. But like the cheaper online resources like Free Code Camp and things like that, it's the hardest part about those is keeping yourself accountable and getting help when you get stuck. And so if you can't pay for a whole boot camp or you're not in a city that offers them, then you might want to turn to online resources, but you don't have accountability. And so I do think that with courses, we have to I think that cohort-based courses that are live with a group like Maven that Gagan Biani from Udemy is doing now, that's an awesome option because if you really want the learning and the accountability, do those. But I think that when people try and do a little bit of both, I haven't seen it work that well because they're kind of two different goals. So I tell people, if you want to meet the right people at the right time and get a really deep immersive experience with those people so they can solve your problems and you can get help from them, all the on deck programs are made for that. If you're trying to learn a lot of content and actionable advice, that's more like Reforge, Bootcamp, Maven, things that are very course and curriculum centric. And I totally think that a business as a whole can do both. Silva has communities that are doing both, but they're a little bit separate. They're kind of different goals. The network-based community, you can stay in that for years. It can continue to be helpful for a long time. A course is kind of like doing a semester of school or a grad program for a year or two. You should probably set aside a lot of time and focus so that you can actually do the coursework, do the homework, learn things. It's just a separate mindset. I went on this whole ramble and I didn't really answer your question of what do I think is the future of learning. My main thing is we all know colleges have not kept up with the times at all. They're trying to teach people this fancy, snooty, liberal arts education from 100 years ago that was just a bunch of rich white guys whose dads were you should become this refined philosopher man. And now it's supposed to be the baseline education for all professionals in the country. And those are so incompatible and they have nothing to do with each other. So I'm really bullish on the future of professional ed tech and higher ed tech to give people actual career training. But I think that's why a lot of people at schools like Georgia Tech and Tufts, everything that's reasonably selective up where we all are pretty confident that we'll get a job. Then we just kind of use it for socializing. And we're oh, I just want to go to a dorm. I want to join clubs. I want to make friends in my major. And I think that's why that was the Twitter answer. But it's really expensive. It's an inefficient way to do that. We should all just be paying for one year of a group that's called, we're going to have selective admissions for you to meet other smart friends. And we're like, great, I'm in. But this like 4 years living in the same place, like crazy expensive majors that don't really prepare us for our jobs at all. So you have to train on your own for your job. I think this system is like not right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this a lot, like recently with friends, roommates, and everybody else, of like how unprepared, or probably like unprepared, are people who are graduating from the school for what they want to do in life, because most people do not do a lot of stuff outside of class because they're like, this is what we're here
Doesn't
for,
prepare you. Yeah.
and that doesn't prepare you. So it's like a chicken and egg problem. Like, you don't know, you think this is going to work when you go out, but this definitely doesn't work. So this is like a debate that we've been having like recently with like friends, roommates, and everybody else. But yeah, it's about it. So like, to wrap this up, like, what is like the one piece of advice that you would want to give people in college, that like actionable advice that they want to like follow to like get their dream job or start their own venture that they've been like thinking about in the past few years or months?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a broken record. I say this on Twitter all the time. I encourage anyone to look at my Twitter at Shriya Nevatia and read my pinned post with all of my favorite inspiration. But the big thing is like basically based on just what you said. Nobody is going to make your career for you. You have to make your career. Your major, your college, your friends, some mentor, some dream company, none of it. None of it is going to do as much as you can do yourself if you like take your career by the reins. Whatever time and energy and space you have in your life on the side, in the evenings, on the weekends, like you have to do all the things. And if you do that, if you're thoughtful, if you're introspective, if you seek out lots of opportunities, I promise it'll pay back over time. But you can't just like expect stuff to happen and fall in your lap, because it won't. And I think like that also create some bitterness in people, because for some people who are super privileged and connected, it does fall in their lap. Like literally their uncle just gives them a job. And then everyone else is like, what the hell? Your uncle could just give you a job? I swear to God, like, again, I'm 30. A lot of those uncle gave them a job guys are just sitting on their butt with that same job. Like, it's not great. Like, they don't know how to take it into their own hands. So they might get their job easily now as a new grad, but like, who cares? You'll surpass them in 8 years. Ignore them, let them take their stupid job. Like, you take your career in your own hands and get something awesome and like set yourself up for something that you actually care about and enjoy, not just like my daddy handed me a job and now I'm set for life.
This was something like Avirath and I were discussing right before the call, like, like exactly before the call, like before you were here, we were talking about this, and it was just like, you bring it up. So once again, I would say like, thanks for the like amazing advice. I recommend checking out your Twitter. I just like pulled it and I was reading your Twitter. So thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for like diving deep into the questions, and I'm pretty sure this would help our like audience members. Avirath, do you have anything to add?
No, like nothing else. Like it was pretty great, I think, and the entire structure of it. And like because recruiting season was going on, we were just stressing about like, oh, this is happening right now, and like, why is that person just took it from her uncle, and this is not. And literally, we have a common friend who's gotten a job from their uncle, and we were like, oh yeah, that guy just got a job from an uncle.
Yeah, let him get it. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
So
guys
once
so much.
again, a big thank you. Really appreciate it.